The rain came down hard on the empty streets of Dallas, Texas, turning the neon reflections into bleeding streaks across the asphalt. Isabella Reyes stood alone beneath a flickering streetlight. Her knuckles were bruised. Her jacket was stained with someone else's blood. Across the street, police sirens wailed in the distance, but she didn't run. She just stared at the phone in her hand. A message glowed on the screen. "You should have stayed buried, Isabella." Her jaw tightened. 3 years ago, the people who sent that message took everything from her. Her job. Her reputation. Her freedom. And the man she loved. But tonight, things were different. Tonight she had proof. Tonight she had names. And tonight, someone was going to pay. Isabella slowly slipped the phone into her pocket, stepped into the rain, and whispered to herself. "Y'all wanted a ghost." Her eyes hardened. "Well, congratulations." A police cruiser turned the corner. But Isabella was already gone. And the war she was about to start would burn half of Texas to the ground. Rain hammered the streets of Dallas, Texas, turning the midnight city into a blur of neon reflections and shimmering asphalt. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, mixing with the low thunder rolling across the sky. The air was thick, humid, and heavy with the smell of gasoline and wet concrete. Under a flickering streetlight stood Isabella Reyes. 30 years old. Dark hair soaked from the rain. Bruised knuckles. A small streak of blood across the sleeve of her black jacket that didn't belong to her. Across the street, traffic lights blinked red over empty intersections. A late-night taco truck hissed as oil sizzled on the grill. 2 drunk college kids staggered down the sidewalk laughing about something that seemed very important to them. But Isabella noticed none of it. Her eyes were locked on the phone in her hand. A message glowed on the screen. "You should have stayed buried, Isabella." She stared at the words for a long moment. Then she slowly slid the phone into her pocket. Her jaw tightened. 3 years ago, the people behind that message had destroyed her life. Her career. Her reputation. Her freedom. They had buried her under lies so deep the entire city believed she deserved it. But tonight, Isabella Reyes had come back. And Dallas had no idea what it had just awakened. A police cruiser turned the corner down the block, its headlights cutting through the rain. Isabella pulled the hood of her jacket up and stepped into the shadows. She whispered quietly to herself. "Y'all wanted a ghost." Her eyes hardened. "Well, congratulations." Then she disappeared into the night. Dallas after midnight had a rhythm of its own. The bankers and lawyers were long gone. Now the city belonged to bartenders, musicians, night shift workers, and people who preferred the darkness. Isabella walked down Commerce Street, passing glowing neon signs and loud bars spilling country music into the rain. 3 years ago she had walked these streets wearing a badge. Now she walked them like a stranger in her own city. A pickup truck roared past with country music blasting through open windows. Someone shouted something about the Cowboys losing another game. A homeless man pushed a shopping cart full of scrap metal across the sidewalk. Life went on. It always did. Even when someone's entire world had burned down. Isabella stopped outside a bar called the Rusted Spur. The kind of Texas bar that smelled permanently like beer and cigarettes. Neon beer signs flickered through the windows. Country music thumped inside. Exactly the kind of place where nobody asked questions. Perfect. She pushed the door open. The smell hit her instantly. Beer. Sweat. Cheap whiskey. A group of oil workers played pool near the back wall. A bartender with a gray beard wiped down glasses. Nobody paid attention to her, which was exactly how Isabella liked it. She walked to the bar and sat down. The bartender glanced up. "What'll it be?" "Water." He raised an eyebrow. "Water?" "Yeah." He chuckled. "Ma'am, this is Texas." She slid a $20 bill across the counter. "Then pretend it's whiskey." The bartender looked at the money, then at her, then shrugged and poured a glass of water. He leaned slightly closer. "You ain't from around here, are you?" Isabella smirked faintly. "Born and raised." "Then why you drinkin' water in a Texas bar?" She took a sip. "Because I'm working." The bartender chuckled again. "Ain't no cops in my bar tonight." Her eyes met his. "I'm not a cop." The bartender studied her face more carefully now, like he was trying to remember something. Then his expression shifted slightly. "Hold up." He leaned forward. "You look familiar." Isabella said nothing. The bartender snapped his fingers. "Wait, yeah." His voice lowered. "You're that girl." The bar suddenly felt quieter. "You remember now?" Isabella said calmly. The bartender nodded slowly. "Yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck. "They said you stole $80 million. They said a lot of things. They also said you went to federal prison." "I did." The bartender looked confused. "So what the hell are you doing back in Dallas?" Isabella set the glass down. "Finishing something." Before the bartender could ask what she meant, the bar door slammed open. Four large men walked inside. Broad shoulders. Black jackets. Not drunk. Not smiling. And definitely not here for a drink. The bartender froze. One of the men looked directly at Isabella and smiled. "Well, damn." He cracked his knuckles. "Look what crawled back into town." Isabella didn't turn around. She already knew. Whitaker's men. The tallest one stepped closer. "Mr. Whitaker says hello." Isabella slowly took another sip of water. "Tell him I said hi." The man chuckled. "You should have stayed gone." She turned in her chair. "And miss all the fun?" The man leaned closer. "You think this is funny?" Isabella shrugged. "Honestly? A little." The bar had gone quiet now. The oil workers stopped playing pool. The bartender stepped back slowly. Everyone could feel the tension. The man cracked his neck. "You know what the problem is?" "What?" "You came back." He threw a punch. But Isabella moved faster. Her fist slammed into his throat. The man collapsed instantly. Before the others reacted, she grabbed a beer bottle from the bar and smashed it across another man's face. Glass exploded everywhere. Someone shouted. Chairs scraped across the floor. The third man pulled a knife. Isabella kicked his knee sideways. A sickening crack echoed through the room. He screamed and dropped. The fourth man froze, breathing hard, staring at the three bodies on the floor. Isabella stepped closer. Slow. Controlled. "Now listen real carefully." The man backed toward the door. She grabbed his jacket. "And tell Whitaker something for me." Her voice dropped to ice. "Tell him the woman he buried." Her eyes burned with fury. just started digging her way out. She shoved him outside into the rain. The bar remained silent. The bartender stared at her like he'd just seen a ghost. Isabella grabbed her jacket and walked toward the door. "Hey," the bartender said quietly. She stopped. "You really going after Whitaker?" "Yeah." He hesitated. "Then you're gonna need help." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Why?" The bartender nodded toward the door. "Because Whitaker ain't the real problem." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" The bartender lowered his voice. "Whitaker answers to someone." Isabella's eyes narrowed. "Who?" But before he could answer, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. Another message. "You should have stayed buried." Then a second message appeared. "Look outside." Isabella slowly turned toward the door. Through the rain-soaked window she saw them. 3 black SUVs pulling up outside the bar. Doors opening. Men stepping out wearing tactical gear. Not street thugs. Professionals. The bartender whispered. "Those ain't Whitaker's boys." Isabella's pulse quickened. "Then whose are they?" The bartender looked terrified. "You don't want to know." The bar door burst open. A tall man in a black suit stepped inside. Calm. Cold. Dangerous. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Isabella. Then he smiled. "Well." His voice echoed through the silent bar. "Isabella Reyes." She felt a chill run down her spine. Because she recognized him. Not personally, but from rumors. Stories whispered among investigators years ago. The man who handled problems powerful people couldn't solve legally. Victor Kane. Former CIA. Now something far more dangerous. He stepped closer. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Isabella's voice remained steady. "Funny." "Oh. I was wondering the same thing about you." Kane glanced at the men she'd knocked unconscious. "Well." He sighed. "You certainly know how to make an entrance." Isabella crossed her arms. "What do you want?" Kane's smile faded. "You." The word hung in the air. "Why?" Kane looked around the bar. Then back at her. "Because 3 years ago." His eyes turned cold. "You discovered something you were never supposed to see." Isabella's stomach tightened. "What did I see?" Kane stepped closer. "A system." Silence filled the room. "A system?" she asked. "Yes." His voice dropped. "A network controlling money, power, and politics across Texas." Isabella's heart pounded. "And you," Kane said quietly, "nearly exposed all of it." The bartender whispered under his breath. "Oh hell." Kane clasped his hands behind his back. But that problem was solved. He tilted his head. "Until tonight." Isabella stared at him. "So what now?" Kane gave a small shrug. "Now we finish what we started." Behind him the men raised their rifles. The entire bar froze. The bartender slowly raised his hands. The oil workers backed toward the wall. Isabella looked around the room. Outnumbered. Outgunned. No exits. Kane sighed. "You really should have stayed buried." Isabella slowly smiled. "Yeah." Her voice was calm. But here's the thing. Kane raised an eyebrow. What? She cracked her knuckles. I'm really bad at staying dead. Kane sighed. Pity. He raised his hand. Kill her. And in that exact moment, police sirens exploded outside the bar. Red and blue lights flooded the windows. Kane frowned. Well. He glanced toward the door. That's inconvenient. Isabella didn't move. Because suddenly she realized something terrifying. She hadn't called the police. Which meant someone else had. And whoever that was already knew exactly where she was. Outside the bar, a police cruiser door slammed shut. Boots hit the pavement. A voice shouted through a megaphone. Isabella Reyes. Come out with your hands up. Isabella's blood ran cold. Because she recognized that voice. Detective Marcus Hale. The man who arrested her 3 years ago. The man who helped destroy her life. And judging by the smile on Victor Kane's face, this was exactly how the night was supposed to go. The trap had been set. And Isabella Reyes had just walked straight into it. Rain kept pounding the streets of Dallas, Texas, turning the city into a blurred maze of red and blue reflections as police lights flooded the outside of the Rusted Spur bar. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Victor Kane stood calmly near the center of the room while his men held their rifles steady. Across from them, Isabella Reyes didn't move. Outside, Detective Marcus Hale's voice boomed through a megaphone. Isabella Reyes. Step out with your hands up. The bar patrons stood frozen against the walls. No one dared speak. No one dared breathe too loud. Kane slowly turned his head toward the windows where flashing police lights strobed through the rain. He sighed. Well, this is unfortunate. Isabella crossed her arms slightly. You didn't call them? Kane smirked. I prefer cleaner solutions. The sirens screamed louder outside. More squad cars were arriving. Doors slammed. Officers shouted commands. The bartender whispered under his breath. Jesus, this whole block's surrounded. Kane glanced back at Isabella. Seems someone else is interested in you tonight. Her eyes narrowed. Yeah. Any idea who? Yeah. She stared at him coldly. The same people who framed me. Kane tilted his head slightly. Detective Hale? You know him? Kane chuckled quietly. Oh, Isabella. He leaned closer. In our world, everyone knows everyone. Outside, the megaphone barked again. This is your last warning. The tension inside the bar thickened. Kane looked toward the door. Then back to Isabella. You have 2 choices. Let me guess, she said. I die either way. Kane smiled. More or less. He gestured casually. If you walk outside, Hale arrests you. And if I stay? My men shoot you. The bartender muttered. Well, that's a hell of a night. Isabella looked around the room. The bar had only one door. 2 windows. Both currently pointed directly at by police spotlights. The patrons were terrified. One wrong move and this place would turn into a war zone. She took a slow breath. Then she smiled slightly. Kane noticed. That expression usually means something violent. Probably. He folded his arms. Go on. Isabella looked toward the bar counter. Then toward the back hallway. Then at Kane. You know what your problem is? What? You think you're the smartest guy in the room. Kane chuckled. I usually am. Isabella shrugged. Not tonight. Before anyone could react, she grabbed the metal bar stool beside her and hurled it straight into the overhead lights. The bulbs exploded. The entire bar plunged into darkness. People screamed. Gunshots erupted instantly. Muzzle flashes lit up the room like lightning. Isabella dropped to the floor and rolled behind the bar counter. Glass shattered everywhere. The bartender ducked beside her. Lady, you are absolutely insane. Stay down. Another gunshot blasted the liquor bottles above them. Whiskey and vodka poured across the counter. Kane's voice echoed through the darkness. Careful! His tone was calm but sharp. Don't hit the civilians. More gunfire cracked through the bar. But Isabella had already moved. She crawled along the floor toward the back hallway. A bullet smashed into the wall inches above her head. She kicked open the back door. Rain and cold wind blasted inside. Outside was a narrow alley soaked in water and garbage. Perfect. Isabella sprinted into the storm. Behind her, Kane's voice shouted. After her! Footsteps splashed behind her. 3 men chased into the alley. Isabella ran hard, boots pounding through puddles. The alley twisted between buildings until it spilled into another street. Police lights flashed everywhere. She slid behind a parked pickup truck just as officers ran past. Search the area. Don't let her get away. Helicopter blades thundered overhead. The spotlight cut across rooftops. Isabella wiped rain from her face. Great. Now the entire Dallas Police Department was hunting her again. She muttered under her breath. Same city, same crap. Suddenly, a car horn honked twice. Short. Sharp. She turned. A dark gray sedan sat across the street. Driver window cracked open. A familiar voice called out quietly. Bella! Her stomach dropped. Because she knew that voice. Even after 3 years. Get in! She hesitated. The car door swung open. Rain poured into the streetlight glow. The driver leaned out slightly. Come on! Isabella finally ran across the road and jumped into the passenger seat. The sedan peeled away instantly. They drove 3 blocks before either of them spoke. Isabella turned slowly. Her eyes burned. Jake Morrison. Jake glanced at her. You look good. She punched him. Hard. Right in the shoulder. Ow. What the hell? You framed me. Jake rubbed his arm. Yeah, I deserved that. You destroyed my life. Jake sighed. Yeah, about that. The car sped through wet streets. Sirens echoed behind them somewhere. Isabella stared at him. You got about 10 seconds to explain before I break your jaw. Jake nodded. Fair. He ran a hand through his wet hair. Whitaker threatened my family. She didn't react. He had photos of my sister, my nephew, their house. Silence filled the car. Jake's voice lowered. He told me if I didn't testify against you, they'd disappear. Isabella looked out the window. Rain streaked across the glass. You should have told me. They were watching everything. You still should have told me. Jake swallowed. I thought prison would be safer than death. She laughed bitterly. Yeah, prison was awesome. Jake glanced at her. I know you hate me. I don't hate you. He blinked. Really? I'm deciding if I should kill you. Jake nodded slowly. That seems fair. They drove in silence for another minute. Then Jake spoke again. Whitaker's not the real problem. I know. Jake frowned. You do? Victor Kane. Jake nearly slammed the brakes. You saw Kane tonight? Yeah. Jake muttered. Oh man, this just got way worse. Isabella looked at him. How much do you know about him? Jake hesitated. Enough to know he doesn't work for Whitaker. Then who? Jake took a deep breath. A private intelligence network. Isabella frowned. What? Jake nodded. They move money through businesses, charities, real estate, all over Texas. Her stomach tightened. The accounts I found. Exactly. Jake looked at her seriously. You weren't investigating a billionaire. You were investigating a system. Rain thundered against the windshield. Isabella leaned back in the seat. Jesus. Jake kept driving. And now that you're back. He glanced at her. They're not going to stop until you're dead. Isabella stared ahead at the glowing Dallas skyline. Her voice was calm. Then we hit them first. Jake chuckled nervously. You're serious. Dead serious. Jake shook his head. Bella, these people control politicians, cops, federal agents. She cracked her knuckles. Good. Jake blinked. Good? Means they have a lot to lose. Jake studied her for a moment. Then slowly smiled. You know what? What? I kind of missed this version of you. She rolled her eyes. Don't get sentimental. Suddenly, headlights appeared behind them. Two black SUVs turned onto the same street. Jake checked the mirror. Oh, come on. Isabella looked back. Her jaw tightened. Whitaker's guys? Jake shook his head slowly. No. The SUVs accelerated. Rain spraying behind them. Jake's voice turned serious. Those are Kane's. The vehicles closed the distance quickly. One of the passengers leaned out the window with a rifle. Jake shouted. Hold on! Gunfire erupted. Bullets shattered the sedan's back window. Glass exploded across the seats. Isabella grabbed the dashboard. Jake slammed the accelerator. The car shot forward into the rain-soaked Dallas night. Behind them the SUVs roared like wolves chasing prey. Jake glanced at Isabella. You ready for a car chase? She loaded the pistol. I was wondering when this night would get interesting. Another burst of gunfire cracked behind them. And somewhere across Dallas. Inside a massive penthouse overlooking the city. Daniel Whitaker stood calmly beside the window. A phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he said quietly. She's alive. He listened for a moment. Then nodded. Understood. Whitaker ended the call. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Cold. Patient. Then he whispered softly to himself. Run while you can, Isabella. Outside the storm raged across Texas. And the hunt had officially begun. The rain over Dallas, Texas had turned the highways into shining rivers of asphalt. Headlights streaked across the wet pavement as traffic thinned into the late hours of the night. The city skyline glowed behind sheets of rain, towering glass buildings reflecting lightning as thunder rolled over the metroplex. Inside the speeding gray sedan, Isabella Reyes gripped the dashboard while Jake Morrison pushed the accelerator to the floor. The engine roared. Behind them, two black SUVs blasted through the intersection, tires hissing on the wet road as they closed the distance. Jake glanced in the rearview mirror. Yeah, they're not giving up. Isabella twisted around in her seat and looked through the shattered back window. The SUVs were gaining fast. Headlights cutting through the rain. Men inside. Rifles pointed forward. Victor Kane's boys, she muttered. Jake swallowed. Fantastic. A burst of gunfire cracked across the highway. Bullets ripped through the air and smashed into the trunk of the sedan. Metal sparked. Jake swerved hard. Son of a... Another round of gunfire shattered what remained of the rear windshield. Glass sprayed across the seats. Isabella ducked instinctively. Jake! I'm working on it. He swung the wheel sharply, sliding the car onto the ramp leading to Interstate 35. The sedan fishtailed on the wet pavement before gripping the road again. Jake punched the gas. The speedometer climbed past 90. Behind them the SUVs followed without hesitation. The hunt had officially begun. Rain hammered the windshield as the car shot onto the highway. Traffic was light but not empty. A semi-truck blasted its horn as Jake cut across 3 lanes. Sorry, buddy. Jake yelled. Isabella twisted around again, lifting the pistol. Keep it steady. Keep it steady? We're going 100 miles an hour. Just drive. Another burst of gunfire came from the first SUV. Bullets sparked across the highway. One round blew out the sedan's side mirror. Isabella leaned halfway out the broken window and fired 2 quick shots. The gun echoed across the empty highway. The SUV swerved slightly. Jake glanced sideways. Did you hit them? Not sure. Encouraging. Lightning flashed across the sky. For a split second the entire highway lit up like daylight. Isabella saw 3 men inside the SUV. All wearing tactical gear. Professional shooters. She fired again. This time one of the SUV headlights exploded. The vehicle drifted slightly before correcting. Jake laughed. Nice. Eyes on the road. I got it. The sedan roared through the storm. Water sprayed from the tires as the chase tore through Dallas. The second SUV accelerated and pulled alongside them. A man leaned out the passenger window with an assault rifle. Jake's eyes widened. Oh, that's not good. Gunfire erupted again. The passenger window beside Isabella shattered completely. She dropped low as bullets tore through the interior. Jake slammed the brakes for a split second. The sedan jerked violently. The SUV overshot them slightly. Now! Jake shouted. Isabella popped back up and fired twice. One round shattered the SUV's windshield. The driver jerked the wheel. The vehicle skidded across 2 lanes and smashed into the guardrail. Metal screamed against metal. Sparks exploded into the rain. Jake stared in disbelief. Holy crap! But the celebration lasted exactly 2 seconds. Because the second SUV was still coming. And it was gaining. Jake checked the mirror again. That guy's pissed now. The SUV accelerated. Its engine growled like a predator closing in for the kill. Suddenly, The passenger window rolled down, and a familiar figure leaned out. Victor Kane. Even through the rain, Isabella recognized him instantly. The calm expression. The cold eyes. He lifted a pistol and fired. The bullet punched through the sedan's rear seat. Jake cursed. "Okay. I officially hate that guy." Isabella reloaded her pistol quickly. "We need to lose them." "Yeah, no kidding. Take the next exit." Jake glanced ahead. Deep Ellum? Exactly. He swung the wheel sharply. The sedan shot off the highway ramp. Behind them, Kane's SUV followed immediately. The streets of Deep Ellum were alive even at this hour. Neon signs flickered over bars and music venues. People crowded sidewalks under umbrellas. Live music echoed through the rain. And suddenly a high-speed chase exploded right through the middle of it. The sedan blasted down the street. People jumped out of the way. Someone shouted. Phones came out instantly. Because nothing attracts attention faster than chaos. Jake swerved between parked cars. "This is a terrible idea." Isabella checked behind them. The SUV was still there. Kane wasn't letting them go. "Take the alley." Jake turned hard. The car slid sideways into a narrow alley between brick buildings. Trash cans flew everywhere. The SUV followed but struggled to maneuver through the tight space. Jake grinned. "Ha!" But Isabella's eyes narrowed. Because something ahead looked wrong. Very wrong. At the end of the alley, 3 police cruisers blocked the exit. Their lights flashed through the rain. Jake slammed the brakes. The sedan skidded to a stop. "Oh, come on." Isabella stared ahead. Her stomach sank. Detective Marcus Hale stepped out of one of the cruisers. Gun in hand. Waiting. Like he knew exactly where they'd come. Jake muttered. "That can't be a coincidence." Isabella shook her head slowly. "No." Behind them, the black SUV rolled into the alley. Victor Kane stepped out calmly. Rain soaking his suit. Now they were trapped. Police in front. Kane behind. Jake whispered. "Well, this is bad." Isabella stared straight ahead. Her mind raced. This wasn't random. They had been guided here. Cornered. Hale walked slowly toward the car. Gun aimed. "You two really know how to cause trouble." Jake leaned toward Isabella. "Got any miracles left?" She whispered back. "Maybe." Hale stopped 10 feet away. "Step out of the vehicle." No one moved. Hale's voice hardened. "Now." Victor Kane approached from behind the sedan. His shooters moved into position. Hale glanced back at Kane. Then something shocking happened. The detective smiled. A small nod passed between them. Jake's eyes widened. "Oh my God." Isabella felt her blood run cold. They're working together. Hale looked at Isabella again. "Did you really think the city would let you win?" The rain pounded down around them. Red and blue lights reflected off the wet alley walls. Kane folded his hands calmly. "This is where your story ends." Isabella slowly reached into her jacket pocket. Jake whispered urgently. "Bella, don't." But she ignored him. She pulled out a small flash drive. Kane's eyes flickered. He recognized it. Interesting. Hale frowned. What is that? Isabella held it up. The list. Silence filled the alley. Kane's expression hardened slightly. Jake looked confused. The list? Isabella's voice echoed through the rain. Every politician, cop, and businessman your network owns. Hale's face changed. You're bluffing. Am I? Kane's voice turned cold. Give it to me. Isabella smiled. No. Hale stepped closer. You're not walking out of here. Isabella shrugged. Maybe not. She suddenly tossed the flash drive into the air. Everyone looked up instinctively. Jake blinked. What are you doing? Isabella grabbed his arm. Trust me. The flash drive fell. And she smashed the gas pedal. The sedan lunged forward. The car rammed directly into Hale's cruiser. Metal exploded. Airbags deployed. The police line shattered. Jake screamed. You're insane. The sedan burst through the blockade and shot out of the alley. Behind them, chaos erupted. Gunfire. Shouting. Kane yelling orders. Jake regained control of the wheel. They sped down the street again. Jake looked at Isabella. You threw away the evidence. She smirked. No. Jake blinked. What? She tapped her jacket pocket. I made a copy. Jake stared at her. Then he burst out laughing. Bella. What? You are terrifying. Behind them, sirens screamed again. The hunt was far from over. And somewhere across the city, Daniel Whitaker watched the news coverage of the chase unfolding live on television. He turned to Victor Kane on the phone. Handle it. Kane's voice was calm. I will. Whitaker looked back at the screen showing Isabella's car speeding through Dallas. His eyes turned cold. Because if she releases that list. He paused. Our entire empire burns. And in the rain-soaked streets of Texas, Isabella Reyes was driving straight toward the truth. Even if it destroyed the entire city. Rain still poured over Dallas, Texas, but the storm in the sky was nothing compared to the one unfolding across the city streets. Police sirens screamed from every direction as helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights slicing through the darkness like giant blades of white light. The gray sedan roared through downtown traffic, tires hissing across the wet pavement. Jake Morrison gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. You know, he shouted over the engine, most people spend Friday nights watching Netflix. Isabella Reyes sat beside him, calm despite the chaos. Her dark hair clung to her face from the rain. Her eyes stayed locked on the rearview mirror. They're still there. Jake checked the mirror. 2 sets of flashing police lights tore through traffic behind them. And farther back. The black SUV. Victor Kane. Jake groaned. Fantastic. So we've got cops chasing us and the CIA assassin guy chasing us. Isabella checked the pistol magazine. Private intelligence contractor. Whatever the hell he is. Jake swerved around a delivery truck and blasted through a red light. The sedan barely missed a taxi. The taxi driver leaned out the window yelling, "Hey! What the hell?" Jake shouted back, "Bad night, buddy." Another police cruiser joined the chase from a side street. Sirens layered over each other. Helicopter blades thundered above. Dallas had officially turned into a war zone. Isabella leaned back slightly. We need to disappear. Jake laughed nervously. You got a magic button for that? She pointed ahead. Take the Woodall Rogers exit. Jake frowned. That heads toward uptown. Exactly. He glanced at her. Bella, that's where Whitaker lives. She nodded. Yep. Jake's eyes widened. You're not serious. Dead serious. Jake shook his head in disbelief. You're planning to drive straight into the lion's den while half the police department is chasing us. Pretty much. Jake let out a breath. You know what? Screw it. Let's do it. He jerked the wheel. The sedan shot onto the exit ramp. Behind them the police followed. But the rain and traffic were starting to slow them down. Jake weaved through narrow streets as the skyline of uptown Dallas rose around them, glass towers, luxury apartments, rooftop bars glowing with soft lights. The kind of neighborhood where billionaires pretended the rest of the world didn't exist. Jake slowed slightly as they passed a quiet park. You really think Whitaker's there? He always sleeps at the mansion when there's trouble. Jake glanced at her. How do you know that? Isabella gave him a small smile. Because 3 years ago I investigated his entire life. Jake nodded slowly. Right. They turned down a private road lined with oak trees. At the end of it sat a massive gated estate. Stone walls. Security cameras. Iron gates taller than a truck. And beyond them, a sprawling mansion glowing under soft yellow lights. Jake whistled. Well, damn. Isabella stared at it. That's where it all started. Jake parked the car behind a row of trees. Police sirens echoed somewhere farther down the road now. But for the moment, they were alone. Jake looked at her. So what's the plan? Isabella pulled the flash drive from her pocket. This. Jake leaned closer. The list. Yeah. Jake shook his head slowly. Bella, if this thing really has the names you say it does. It does. Then half the government in Texas is about to lose their jobs. Or their freedom. Jake sighed. Or their lives. Isabella opened the car door. Let's go. They moved through the rain toward the mansion gate. Jake noticed the cameras turning slightly. Tracking them. Pretty sure we're already spotted. Isabella didn't stop. Good. Suddenly the gates opened. Slow. Silent. Jake frowned. That seems suspiciously convenient. Inside the estate driveway lights flickered on. A voice echoed through hidden speakers. Come in, Isabella. Jake whispered. Yep, definitely a trap. They walked up the long driveway anyway. Because at this point, there was no turning back. The mansion doors opened before they reached them. Standing inside was Daniel Whitaker. Perfect suit. Gray hair. Calm smile. The billionaire looked exactly like the respected public figure the news always showed. Except tonight. His eyes held something darker. Well, Whitaker said pleasantly. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Isabella stopped a few feet away. You framed me. Whitaker chuckled softly. You exposed things you shouldn't have. Jake stepped beside her. You launder money for a criminal network. Whitaker shrugged. I manage financial logistics. Isabella's voice turned cold. 4 murderers. Whitaker clasped his hands. 4 stability. Jake muttered under his breath. Man, rich people really love fancy words. Whitaker ignored him. You've caused quite a bit of chaos tonight, Isabella. Good. Whitaker studied her carefully. 3 years ago you were an idealistic investigator. He tilted his head. Now look at you. Isabella stepped closer. You destroyed my life. Whitaker shook his head slowly. No. You destroyed it yourself when you refused to understand the world. And what world is that? Whitaker smiled faintly. The real one. Before she could answer, a familiar voice spoke from behind them. I told you she'd come. Isabella spun around. Victor Kane stood near the gate. His SUV behind him. Armed men spreading out across the driveway. Jake groaned. And here comes the hitman. Whitaker nodded politely toward Kane. Right on time. Isabella looked between them. So this is it. Whitaker nodded. Yes. Jake raised his hand slightly. You know what's crazy? Both men looked at him. What? You guys really think you've already won? Whitaker raised an eyebrow. Have we not? Jake grinned. Bella. Isabella pulled out her phone. Whitaker frowned slightly. What are you doing? She pressed a button. And suddenly, the giant television screen inside Whitaker's mansion flickered on. Then another. And another. News broadcasts across Dallas began interrupting programming. A female reporter appeared on screen. Breaking news tonight. Whitaker's calm expression began to crack. A massive data leak has just been released containing the names of dozens of politicians, police officials, and business leaders connected to illegal financial operations across Texas. Victor Kane's eyes widened. Whitaker turned slowly toward Isabella. You didn't. She smiled. Oh yeah. Jake chuckled. That list you wanted so bad? He pointed at the screens. It's public now. The news reporter continued. The documents appear to connect multiple powerful figures to a hidden financial network worth billions. Whitaker's face turned pale. Outside the estate, sirens began approaching again. Not just police this time. Federal vehicles. Dozens of them. Kane looked at Whitaker. You said she didn't have backup. Whitaker stared at Isabella. You've just destroyed everything. She stepped closer. Good. The gates of the estate burst open as federal agents stormed the property. Shouting commands. Weapons raised. Chaos erupted across the mansion grounds. Jake laughed. Well. He looked at Isabella. That escalated quickly. But Isabella wasn't smiling. Because as the agents rushed past them, Victor Kane was gone. And deep down she knew something terrifying. Whitaker wasn't the real mastermind. And Victor Kane had just escaped. The rain finally began to slow over Dallas, Texas, but the city was far from quiet. Sirens echoed across the hills of uptown as federal vehicles flooded the massive estate of Daniel Whitaker. Black SUVs, armored vans, and flashing red-blue lights surrounded the mansion like a swarm closing in on wounded prey. Agents in tactical gear stormed through the gates, shouting commands. Federal agents! Hands where we can see them! Men in suits ran across the wet driveway. Helicopters hovered overhead. Television news vans had already begun lining the streets outside the estate walls. And standing in the middle of it all was Isabella Reyes. Her jacket soaked from rain. Her hands clenched tightly. 3 years of anger, betrayal, and survival had led her to this exact moment. Jake Morrison stood beside her, watching agents drag Daniel Whitaker down the mansion steps in handcuffs. Whitaker's perfect billionaire composure was gone. His hair messy. His face pale. But his eyes burned with hatred. As agents pushed him toward a waiting vehicle, he locked eyes with Isabella. "You think this ends tonight?" Whitaker hissed. She stepped closer. "It ends for you." Whitaker laughed bitterly. "You really don't understand, do you?" Isabella didn't answer. Whitaker leaned toward her as agents forced him forward. "Victor Kane doesn't run." The words stuck in her mind like ice. "He hunts." Then the agents shoved him into the vehicle and slammed the door. Jake exhaled slowly. Well. He rubbed his face. That was intense. Isabella watched the convoy drive away. But something didn't feel finished. Not even close. Because Whitaker was right about one thing. Victor Kane didn't run. He planned. He prepared. And he never lost control of a situation unless he wanted to. Jake noticed the look on her face. "Bella?" She didn't respond. Her mind was racing. Kane had been here minutes ago. Armed men everywhere. A perfect opportunity to fight. But instead, he disappeared. That wasn't panic. That was strategy. Jake followed her gaze. "You think he's gone?" Isabella shook her head slowly. "No." Her voice was quiet. "He's setting up the next move." Jake groaned. "Of course he is." Sirens still screamed across the estate as federal agents moved through the mansion collecting evidence. Boxes of documents. Computers. Hard drives. Years of corruption finally being dragged into the light. But Isabella knew something the agents didn't. Whitaker was only the banker. Kane was the blade. And the blade was still out there. Jake stretched his back inside. "Well, I guess that's it." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" Jake paused. Then he frowned. "Okay, yeah, when you say it like that it sounds stupid." Suddenly Isabella's phone buzzed. She pulled it out. Unknown number. Jake glanced at the screen. That's never good. She answered anyway. "Hello." Silence. Then a calm voice spoke. "Congratulations, Isabella." Her stomach tightened instantly. "Victor Kane." Jake mouthed silently, "Is that him?" She nodded slightly. Kane continued speaking. "You did something tonight very few people ever manage." "And what's that?" "You damaged the system." Isabella's voice was cold. "I destroyed it." Kane chuckled softly. "No." He paused. "You exposed one layer." Jake leaned closer, trying to hear. Isabella walked a few steps away. "What do you want, Kane?" "Closure." Her jaw tightened. "Then turn yourself in." Kane laughed again. "You know better than that." Lightning flickered across the distant sky. The storm was almost gone. But the tension remained. Kane spoke again. 3 years ago you discovered the network. Yes. You were supposed to disappear quietly. Well, that didn't work out. No. Kane's voice grew more serious. You are a problem, Isabella. And you're a coward hiding behind a phone. Silence followed. Then Kane said something that made her blood run cold. I'm not hiding. She looked around the estate slowly. Agents everywhere. Lights everywhere. But still. Her instincts screamed something was wrong. Kane continued. I'm very close. Jake noticed her expression. What? She whispered. He's here. Jake blinked. What? Suddenly, the lights across the mansion property shut off. Everything went dark. Agents shouted. Power's out. Night vision. Gunfire exploded from the far side of the estate. Screams echoed across the grounds. Chaos erupted instantly. Jake grabbed Isabella's arm. Oh, come on. More gunshots cracked through the darkness. Victor Kane's voice whispered through the phone. See? A spotlight from a helicopter flickered wildly across the lawn. Agents scattered for cover. Vehicles crashed into each other. Someone shouted. Snipers! Isabella's eyes scanned the darkness. Where are you? Kane's voice was calm. Behind you. She spun around. And there he was. Victor Kane stepped out from the shadows near the mansion fountain. Rainwater dripped from his coat. His pistol aimed directly at her. Jake froze. Oh, that's bad. Kane looked almost impressed. You've caused extraordinary damage tonight. Isabella didn't lower her gaze. You're finished. Kane shook his head slowly. You still don't understand. He gestured around the chaotic estate. Whitaker was replaceable. Isabella's chest tightened. The network survives. Jake muttered. This guy really loves dramatic speeches. Kane ignored him. But you. His eyes locked on Isabella. You're a liability. He raised the pistol slightly. The helicopter spotlight suddenly hit them. The beam illuminated the fountain, the rain, and the two enemies facing each other. Agents shouted nearby. But none of them had a clear shot. Everything had come down to this. One final moment. Isabella spoke quietly. You ruined my life. Kane's expression didn't change. You forced my hand. You framed me. You forced my hand. You killed innocent people. You forced my hand. Her voice hardened. You know something? What? You're full of crap. Kane pulled the trigger. But Isabella had already moved. She tackled Jake to the ground as the bullet whizzed past. Agents opened fire from both sides. Kane rolled behind the fountain. Gunfire echoed across the estate. Jake shouted over the noise. Bella! I see him! She grabbed a fallen agent's rifle and fired toward the fountain. Bullets shattered the stone. Water exploded into the air. Kane fired back. The rounds cracked past her ear. Jake grabbed a pistol from the ground. Okay, teamwork time. They moved together. Left. Right. Closing the distance. Kane fired again. Jake ducked behind a statue. Man, this guy is annoying. Isabella sprinted forward. The rifle empty. She tossed it aside and drew her pistol. Kane stepped out from behind the fountain at the same time. Both guns raised. Both aimed. Both ready. But Isabella fired first. The shot echoed across the estate. Kane froze. His pistol slipped from his hand. He looked down slowly. Blood spreading across his chest. The mastermind of the network staggered backward, then collapsed into the water of the fountain. Silence fell across the estate. The rain finally stopped. Agents slowly approached. Jake exhaled loudly. Well. He looked at Isabella. That was one hell of a night. She stared at the fountain. At the man who had hunted her for years. And finally, the weight lifted from her chest. For the first time in 3 years, Isabella Reyes was free. Jake walked beside her. What now? She looked out at the Dallas skyline. The city lights glowing through the fading storm. Her voice was calm. Now? Jake waited. She slipped her hands into her jacket pockets. We rebuild. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the first light of dawn began to rise over Texas. Because the shadow that once hunted Isabella Reyes was finally gone. And she had shown the entire world one simple truth. Some ghosts don't stay buried.